In previous New Age looping courses, you worked to gain consistency in the gauge of your stitches. In this class, you'll work to keep your stitches from being too even and regular in size. One of the hallmarks of Freeform is variety. Often that means frequent changes in the gauge of the stitching used to fill an area. To make that look easy, effortless, and, well, free, you need to use all the thread control skills that you've developed and be very deliberate in your allocation of thread on each stitch. In the last unit, you began placing anchors and bridges to create live edges and to start defining spaces to fill. You won't need to have all your anchors and bridges in place before you start filling. Generally, it's a much more organic process. You place an anchor, work some stitches, build a bridge, work some more stitches, maybe place another anchor, start filling and build more bridges here and there as you fill the available space. In the next unit of this lesson, we'll explore strategies for working back and forth. But in this unit, we'll work mainly in a spiral fashion, moving around a three-dimensional object and also working around the perimeter of a defined space, filling towards the center of that space. If you have a working thread available from, say, stitching the ends of an anchor together, that's a good place to start. If not, anchor a thread anywhere you like. You can use the trapped tails thread addition method, trapping only the tail of the new thread if there's not an old tail that needs to be secured there. Proceed with filling as you saw in the last unit. Make a few stitches of one size, then deliberately change the allocation of thread to make stitches of a different size. As you spiral around, you'll be skipping stitches in some places and adding stitches in others. The process is the same as when you skip or add stitches to decrease or increase, but the results can be quite different. And it all depends on your intention and your thread allocation. When you skip a stitch to reduce the diameter of a piece, you also reduce the allocation of thread for that lag. That's a decrease. When you skip one or two or more lags on the live edge for design purposes and not for a decrease, you don't allocate less thread. In fact, you might allocate more. So we won't call those decreases. Instead, we might call them skips or just big lags. Next time you come around to one of those big lags, you might make a few stitches on it, basically treating it like a base cord, or you could make a whole bunch of stitches on that big lag. While that might sound like the definition of an increase, you'll probably be changing your gauge again soon with a bunch of skips. So we won't call it increasing when you add stitches without the intent to add volume. Instead, we'll call those adds, skips and adds. We'll talk more about those in the design unit of this lesson. If it's possible, rotating the mold as you work can help make it easier for you to use your non-dominant hand for thread control. You can audition potential choices by laying the thread where your next lag would be to visualize the results before you actually make the stitch. You can help secure a large stitch by following it with a small stitch. Pull that small stitch tight or not, whatever feels right for the materials you're using and the piece you're working on. When you're filling a defined area and working generally around the perimeter towards the center, at some point you'll need to secure the end of the thread. You may want to give it a full wrap around the needle and pull it into a knot and then maybe bury that tail. Or if you have another defined area nearby, you might bury the tail or whip it around other stitches to work your way to that spot so you can keep stitching with that thread. In the last unit, you learned to make beefy big lags. You can also whip across a single thread, whether it's a big lag, a bridge, or any old stitch that you feel should be whipped. For those of you who have cross knit looping in your skill set, keep in mind that you can use that variation to good effect in your fillings. As you get more filling worked, you'll feel an increase in the tension on the piece. In a later unit of this lesson, you'll learn a technique for taking up the slack in a filling. But before we leave this demonstration piece, let me quickly describe how I completed it. I picked up a thread and worked into the lower edge of the first double needle chain anchor placed around the narrowest part of the mug. Then I did more filling, working generally in a spiral around the lower part of the mug and decreasing the volume to make the sheath fit snugly. I added some stitching at the top too to help stabilize the rim so I could add a tab for a carabiner. The beaner lets me clip the empty mug to the strap of my backpack or tote bag instead of taking a chance on the mug leaking inside. In the next unit, you'll see some variations on familiar methods for working back and forth, which are great for freeform fillings. And you'll see some additional anchor options. I'll see you there.